In this special episode, we depart from Queenstown and follow the spectacular journey to New Zealand's highest mountain, Aoraki, Mt Cook. As a tour guide in the area, I get to experience this spectacular part of the world in all seasons. From the Clay Cliffs, the famous Hooker Valley track, with scenic flights landing on New Zealand's largest glacier, to the turquoise waters of Lake Tekapo. This episode has it all. Join us for this adventure over a year in the making on Global Travel Stories. Our journey starts departing from Queenstown via the spectacular Kawarau Gorge. A key stop within the gorge is the hydroelectric dam, the Roaring Meg, an even more special sight if you're lucky enough to glimpse it with a bit of snowfall. We talk about the history of the dam, the gorge, and how they got their names in a previous episode worth checking out. From there we continue via Cromwell and the stunning man-made Lake Dunstan toward the Lindis Pass. The drive becomes flooded with colour by the end of spring as the lupins take over the Otago and Canterbury regions. As beautiful as they are, Russell lupins were originally introduced to New Zealand from the Americas in the 1940s for cheap livestock feed. They have since spread widely throughout the regions with significant impact on the native ecosystem. Approximately halfway between Queenstown and Mt Cook, we cross over from Otago to Canterbury at the highest point on the National Highway. The Lindis Pass sits at 971 metres above sea level and was named by John Turnbull Thompson, who surveyed the area in 1857. Thompson named the area after his home in Lindisfarne, England. Apparently, the two places look nothing alike. Along the way we stopped at Omarama, a Moari name for the place of light. Here we are greeted by young lambs in the spring before visiting a famous geological feature known as the Clay Cliffs. Before the last glacial maximum around 20,000 years ago, the wide valley plains surrounding Omarama were submerged beneath a large inland lake, and a clay sedimentary foundation was formed at the bottom of the lake. Towards the end of the last ice age, a little over 10,000 years ago, thawing ice and debris flooded into the region, bringing gravel layers to settle above the clay foundation. Fractal rifts in the nearby alpine fault formed uplift within the region. This, combined with the natural erosive forces such as wind and rain, exposed the sedimentary layers within the hills and sculpted them into unique pinnacle and canyon-like structures. There are a number of great stops on the road to Aoraki Mt Cook, including the High Country Salmon Farm, where you can catch sustainable, hormone and antibiotic-free Chinook salmon. Or in the summertime, visit the Mt Cook Lavender Farm, where you can try fresh New Zealand lavender and honey pollen ice cream. The road soon takes us via the turquoise waters of Lake Pukaki. With Aoraki looming in the distance, the lake lends the legend of Rakaihutu, an important figure in Maori history as the leader of the first migration of Maori to New Zealand, Aotearoa. In mythology, Rakaihutu was said to have carved out the glacial lakes with his core, or agricultural digging stick, on his explorative journey into the interior. Aoraki Mt Cook, New Zealand's highest mountain, was first summited in 1894 by Tom Fyfe, Michael Clark and George Graham via the North Ridge. New Zealander Sir Edmund Hillary, known as the first man to summit Everest, was the first to summit the South Ridge in 1948, as practice for his Everest summit in 1953. The scale of the mountain is similar to the height of Everest summit from base camp and is known for its technical difficulty due to glaciation. About 80 people have died in the past century attempting to summit Aoraki Mt Cook. We take a much gentler trail entering the national park as we hike the world-famous Hooker Valley Trail.
on my left-hand side here, we have the Mueller Lake. And the Mueller Lake was a big glacial mass up until about 100 years ago. It's since retreated up into those glaciers you see up on the top of the mountain there, known as the Mueller Glacier. These are what you call a hanging glacier, and that's what typically happens when a valley glacier retreats up into the mountain.
Alrighty, so I'm here on the Hooker Valley Trail with Sam and Vince.
Hi.
So the Hooker Valley Trail is one of the most famous trails in New Zealand because of its spectacular scenery. This is a 10-kilometer hike out and back, and it's set inside of this big, stunning glacial carved valley known as the Hooker Valley. Now, glaciers carved into parts of this valley up until about 10,000 years ago, right down through this area here and carved all the way down to the end of Lake Pukaki. So the mountain behind me, Aoraki or Mt Cook, is the highest mountain in New Zealand at 3,724 meters or 12,217 feet. It sits in the middle of a range known as the Southern Alps, and that's basically a mountain range that runs from the bottom of the South Island of New Zealand all the way to the top along the west coast, formed by two tectonic plates coming together, forming uplift. These mountains are some of the fastest growing mountains in the world, growing roughly the same rate as your fingernails. Scientists estimate in the last 2 million years they've grown somewhere in the vicinity of 28 kilometers. They've eroded roughly about 25 kilometers, leaving an average remainder of about 3,000 meters. So we've had several glacial periods here in this region. The last one existed between 10 and 20,000 years ago, and the glaciers that came down through this valley would have been absolutely massive, reaching almost the tops of some of these peaks around here, and the valley floor below was up to 500 meters deeper than it currently sits. Now, the name Aoraki means cloud piercer, which is exactly what it's doing right now. And the name Mount Cook comes from Captain James Cook, who was a lieutenant at the time, back in 1770, basically making his way down the west coast of New Zealand and up onto the east coast of Australia. Now, Cook never actually spotted Aoraki in the background there when he was sailing down the west coast on the other side of these mountains, because Aoraki was doing as the name suggested, hiding in the clouds. You'll notice when I say the name Aoraki, Mount Cook, I always use the Maori name first, and the reason being is because it's such an important place to the Maori people. During the 1998 settlement with Ngāi Tahu, the iwi or tribe in this area, it was declared that the Maori names would be awarded to important places that are very spiritual to the Maori people. Now, this is one of the only places in New Zealand where the Maori name actually precedes its European or English counterpart. And that's because of a story that goes back a long, long time ago. Not only has to do with the foundation of this mountain up here, but also as well has to do with the foundation of New Zealand itself. Now, in the beginning, the sky and the earth were separate realms or separate entities. We had the Sky Father, his name was Rangi, and the Earth Mother, her name was Papatunuku, and they came together in a marriage. The inhabitants of each realm were not too happy with this marriage because it brought the two worlds together and it didn't allow them much space to move. So Rangi had some children. His eldest son's name was Aorangi or Aoraki, depending on which dialect you go with. He decided to come down here with his brothers in their waka, their boat. When they came down here, they talked with the inhabitants of the land, some of their brothers or Atuas, gods in the land realm here, and they couldn't figure out a way of separating the Sky Father with the Earth Mother. Papatunuku, she did not want to separate from the Sky Father. So they returned back up into the heavens, disappointed in their magical waka. Along the way, Aoraki was chanting some powerful words in his karakia, his prayer, and he actually forgot those words when he was distracted by what was going on below. The earth started to slip away and separate from the sky. Now this sent Aoraki and his brothers crashing down into the Tasman Sea below. What had happened is one of their stepbrothers, an Atua god known as Tanemahuta, was able to lie down on his back and separate the sky with his feet. And this is symbolized by a tree up on the North Island, a kauri tree called Tanemahuta. Aoraki and his brothers were stranded in the Tasman Sea. They were clinging to the wreckage of the waka of the boat, and a really cold wind blew from the south and froze them into position. Aoraki became the mountain you see behind me here, and his two brothers became the Southern Alps either side of him. And that boat, Waka, it became the South Island of New Zealand. Now that boat is also known by its other name, Te Waka o Maui, the boat of Maui, which was used by Maui to fish up the North Island with his magical fishhook. So not only does it have to do with the formation of this beautiful mountain and this mountain range behind me here, but also the formation of New Zealand itself, Aotearoa.
This story is very important to Maori people. I would like to acknowledge this is not the only version and respect all versions of this story, along with their impacts on Maori beliefs and culture.
So I'm at the Tasman Lake here in the Aoraki Mt Cook National Park. You can see all the icebergs below, and these are fragments of the main glacial body, the Tasman Glacier, New Zealand's largest glacier that sits at the very end of the lake, 6 kilometers away. Now this whole lake here was actually once part of the main glacial body just 30 years ago. In the early 1990s, it started to form puddles and pools inside the glacial body that once extended right to this glacial wall here known as a moraine. And then at that point, it started to disappear and melt backwards over that period of time. Average, it melts at about 200 meters per year. Looks like we've had a lot of calving this season, though. It has been a very, very hot summer, which is what has formed all these icebergs here in the lake. Now, the glacial body that once carved out this valley, going back in the last ice age between 10 and 20,000 years ago, would have stretched from one side of the valley to the other. And as high up as some of the tops of these mountains, or at least near onto the tops of the mountains, it carved down through this valley here. So glaciers actually start off in higher altitudes, and when they do, they basically compile up. So year after year, typically in an ice age, you have snow that will compile. And of course, in the summertime, that snow is not being melted at the rate that it's actually falling down in the winter. Now, due to the pressure of the snow that falls then on top, it eventually squeezes the snow that sits on the bottom. Tons and tons of pressure squeezing that snow, squeezing all the oxygen out and forming blue ice. This blue ice actually melts from the bottom. It's known as basalt melt, and scientists estimate that the basalt melt in this area here is 12 times faster than what it has been historically, which is why our glaciers are disappearing so quickly. Now, eventually the glaciers had melted away through these valleys behind me here, and when that happened, it dragged down a lot of rocks and rubble that came down from the mountains. Those same rocks and rubble are what I'm actually tracking on right now. So this is known as the terminal moraine, and the rocks on the side is known as the lateral moraine, which are basically the rocks that have been carved up due to the glacial movement. Over thousands of years, river systems have dragged down these rocks. They've filled up the valley floor, and the true valley floor itself is somewhere between 500 and 1,000 meters below the valley, what we see behind us here.
The best way to see Aoraki Mt Cook National Park is from above. I've been lucky enough to experience this twice with Inflite Mt Cook helicopters and ski planes, experiencing both of their modes of transport. With 70 years of experience, I felt I was in great hands, plus these guys literally invented the ski plane. In 1955, Mt Cook ski planes founder Harry Wrigley was the first to develop the retractable skis on planes, allowing them to take off from an airfield and land on snow. Both the ski plane and helicopter have their advantages. With their ultimate alpine experience, I was able to test out both modes on the one trip. From above, we could see the ice carving of the Tasman Glacier into the lake, along with the extent of the mountain sediment collapsed onto the lower parts of the glacier from its lateral moraine. This is due to the rapid shrinking of the glacial ice. helicopter departure, we took a different route. Instead of the ultimate alpine experience, we got to try out their longest scenic flight itinerary, known as the Grand Circle. This took us up via the peak of Aoraki to the West Coast glaciers on the other side of the Southern Alps. First sighting of the West Coast glaciers brought us to Fox Glacier. Due to landslides and flooding from rapid glacier melt, Fox Glacier is no longer accessible by road or trail to the public since 2019, so taking a scenic flight is the best option when it comes to viewing the once iconic glacier. The other West Coast glacier is Franz Josef, which we explored in much more detail during our 2020 NZ road trip video in the very first episode. Seeing these vanishing giants in their entirety brings about a level of gratitude for being able to witness something so great and powerful, yet also so vulnerable to a rapidly changing climate. One of the great things about Inflite Mt Cook ski planes and helicopters is their commitment to sustainability. With an award-winning gold standard in environmental practices and funding, Inflite are at the forefront of sustainable tourism and are the only carbon zero aviation operator in New Zealand at the time of this recording.
Alrighty, so on top of the Tasman Glacier, New Zealand's largest glacier, and in the backdrop there, we have Aoraki Mount Cook, New Zealand's highest mountain, 3,724 meters high.
At 23 kilometres in length, up to 4 kilometres wide and 600 metres thick, the Tasman Glacier is still New Zealand's largest glacier, despite its rapid melt since the 1990s. To experience it from above and up close is nothing short of breathtaking. The Aoraki Mount Cook National Park is part of a 2.6 billion hectare World Heritage listed region that encompasses approximately 10% of New Zealand's landmass, stretching down to the southern tip of Fiordland National Park, a region I'll be covering in a future episode. I'd like to thank Inflite Mt Cook helicopters and ski planes, along with cheeky Kiwi travel. As far as tourism goes, they are both the best at what they do in this amazing UNESCO protected region. Check out the links below for more information about both of these amazing companies. From Mount Cook, we head nearby to the picturesque township of Tekapo, famous for the Category 1 listed historic Church of the Good Shepherd, which was built in 1935. Also famous for the abundant lupins during late spring and early summer.
Alrighty, so I'm up here with Moari from Tokyo.
Hi.
We're in Lake Tekapo, and we are hiking up to the Mount John Observatory, so the astronomical observatory looking over Lake Tekapo. Let's check it out. So the name of the lake behind us, Tekapo, is a mispronunciation of the true Maori name, Tekapo, which meant a sleeping mat under the stars. Now that could actually mean that it was just a place to sleep on one of their migrations, or it could actually talk about the lake itself representing the sleeping mat under the clear night stars that we get in this area. The turquoise blue color of the lake comes from the glacial silt that runs off from the mountains. Basically, when the glaciers grind up against the rocks in the mountain, it forms a type of white powder or substance known as glacial flour. When that settles to the base of the lake, the light shines through into the lake and reflects off the bottom, causing an optical illusion known as refraction, which is essentially the other colors of the white light being filtered out by the water itself. So that was the Mount John Observatory. It's part of the Dark Sky project. It's actually New Zealand's largest observatory for observing the stars. The Dark Sky project gets its name from the dark sky zone that we sit in, which basically means that in the area there are restrictions on light, causing light pollution. So in town, for example, in Tekapo or Twizel, which is also in the region, the street lamps will be on the ground facing down, or all the hotels and restaurants will have sort of light blocking windows, so it won't distract from the natural beauty of the night sky, because it is so beautiful and pristine here. So that's part of the reason why they have the project here. And like I said,
Our next episode features another glorious summer in the adventure capital of the world, our home of Queenstown, New Zealand.
thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed our content, please like and subscribe.
And we'd love if you could leave us a comment letting us know what you've enjoyed or what you'd like to see more of.
And help us grow our channel. Become part of the Global Travel Stories family by sharing with friends, family, or anyone you think would enjoy our content. Thanks, guys.